going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about Magician Apprentice, the comic book adaptation of the novel by Raymond E. Feist. This is by, the book itself that this is adapting is by Raymond Feist. The adaptation is written by Michael Avon Oeming and Brian Glass. They worked on Mice Templar, which I have talked about before on this channel. Artwork in the first 3 issues is by Brett Booth. In the second 3 issues is by Ryan Stegman. Colors by Vinicius Andrade and Kieran Oates, and letters by Simon Boland. This is the first 6 issues of a 12-issue adaptation of the first Rift War book, which was called Magician Apprentice. And unfortunately, I did not like this comic, this graphic novel, and I wanted to. I am a pretty big fan of Oeming and Glass. I really liked Mice Templar, and I've liked other things that they have worked on together and separately. And so I really wanted to like this a lot more than I did. And I want to say the big problem with this book is that it is very, very difficult to do a comic book adaptation of a novel. Most novels are not written in an episodic way. If you wanted to do a comic book adaptation of Homer's The Odyssey, that would probably be pretty easy because there's lots of little episodes that make up the entire story. You could do an issue here where Telemachus goes to visit one of the kings who fought with Odysseus in a Trojan War and says, hey, what do you know about my dad? Where was the last place you saw him? And then that could be an issue. And then you could have an issue where Odysseus is stuck on the island with the Cyclops, and then an issue where he's stuck on the island with Circe, and then an issue with Scylla and Charybdis, etc. There's lots of small adventures that make up the whole of the Odyssey. But most books that were written in the last 30 to 50 years are not constructed that way, unless they were written originally for a magazine and then they were later collected into a book. Stephen King's first Dark Tower book, The Gunslinger, it was originally published in shorter installments in a magazine and then was later collected into a book. But most of the time, if you have a book that was written as a book, it's going to be very difficult to turn that into a comic book, a sequential comic book that is coming out in smaller installments, because the pacing for a novel is going to be very different than the pacing of a comic book. Now, I do not have Magician Apprentice, the book that this comic book is adapting. I do have these 2 Raymond E. Feist books, and they're both about the same size. This one is just under 400 pages. It's 384 pages long. And so, since this comic book, the Magician Apprentice series, was 12 issues, and this is the first 6, I'm assuming that this is adapting roughly the first half of the first Rift War book. So, that would put us at just under 200 pages. Something like 160, something like that. That is still a lot of material to try and adapt in only 6 issues. And a lot of times you can put a lot of information into 1 page of text, and some of that will be setting the scene. Some authors, they might spend half a page describing how the sunset is roaring over the hills, and it creates a special kind of golden brown in the sky, and they will spend a lot of time describing the sunset. And in a comic book, in 1 panel, I can look at it and say, okay, it's sunset, I get it. But there are other things that you can do in a novel that are much more difficult to do in a comic book. You can have characters and their thoughts, and you can get that across much easier in a book than you can in a comic book. In a comic book, you're seeing what's happening, but unless you are just covering the entire page with thought balloons where a character is thinking something, it's going to be very difficult to convey the same information in a book like this than it would be in a book like this. And a lot of stuff doesn't really happen in this book. Basically, the premise is this is some fantasy kingdom of humans. There are dwarves in this world, there are elves in this world, and there's this guy, Pug, that's him on the cover. Pug is out one night, and then he's almost attacked by a wolf. This hunter brings him to the court magician, and then the court magician lets the kid look into a crystal ball, and he notices that the kid has some kind of magical talent. And so it's time when all the kids in the kingdom turn 14 13, it's time for the various masters of their trade to choose who they want to take as their apprentices. And the court magician, he takes in Pug as his apprentice. And that's basically it. This book, the first 6 issues of this 12-issue series, basically just covers the inciting incident. Every story that has some kind of conflict, so in theory, every story should have an inciting incident that changes the status quo. The status quo before this story kicks off is that Pug lives with his friend Tomas. Most of the time he's called Tomas, but in the extra features in the back of the book, they have him listed as Thomas, so I have no idea. But he lives with his friend Tomas and Tomas's parents, and then Tomas's dad is kind of a jerk. He's like, Pug needs to go and take care of himself. He doesn't need Tomas constantly looking after him. And they're buddies. They're talking about, I wonder who's going to choose us as apprentices this year. That's the status quo. That's where everything is normal. And then you kick things off with a change in what is normal. And then you create a new normal for the rest of the story. Every story will have an inciting incident. For Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, it's R2-D2 and C-3PO coming into the possession of his aunt and uncle. And then furthermore, his aunt and uncle dying, and that kicks off Luke's story, where he decides to go with Obi-Wan to become a Jedi Knight. This story basically just has the inciting incident, and then the rest of it is characters just kind of hanging out. At one point, after Pug has become the magician's apprentice, his friend Tomas has become the swordmaster's apprentice, they discover a ship that's wrecked on the shore close to the kingdom, and it's these alien people. They don't look or act anything like anyone that any of this story has ever met before. They have magic scrolls that are very different than the scrolls that our people in this story are familiar with. They are it's like Tsunari, I think is what they're called, and they are from another world. They came to this world through a big portal, and hence the title of the entire franchise, Rift War. A rift being like a tear in space that leads from one world to another. And so we've set up that there are these people, a warrior race from another planet, and they have come to this world for some reason. We don't really know why. It's hinted at a little bit, but it's not made especially clear. And then the people in this story, in this kingdom, they have to get ready for the potential of war. And that's it. That's all that happens in this 6 issues. And when you're reading a book like this, and you know that this is almost 400 pages, you can go 50 or 60 pages and very little happens, and you're okay with that because you know that you're still less than a fifth of the way through the story. You can probably think of a movie that you have watched where you're less than a fifth of the way into the movie, and you're still kind of setting up, okay, this is the status quo of this world. This is what's normal in this world. And we're setting up all of our characters, and we're kind of setting up, okay, this guy is doing this thing, this girl is doing this thing, and then you probably are getting into the inciting incident around a fifth of the way into your story. Now, you'll look at like a 3-act structure, and it would be closer to the end of Act 1 would be your inciting incident. There's no hard and fast rule on that. It might be a little earlier, it might be a little later, but when you're reading a book that's this size, you could get 50, 60 pages in, and obviously you want something exciting to happen, but there can be a whole lot of setup before you get to the actual story stuff in the book. And unfortunately, with a comic book, you are very limited on how much space you have and what you can do. If I'm reading a comic book, I don't want 6 issues where basically all we get is this kid becomes an apprentice to the magician. I want more than that in a 6-issue span. And I would really want that to be the plot of like the first issue, where he becomes the apprentice at the end of the first issue, and then he starts going on adventures in the next 5 issues. And there is some stuff that happens. At one point, he is appointed to be the escort for, not in a weird prostitute way, but the escort to the princess, and then he saves her because some trolls attack. They're out in the middle of the woods having a picnic, and then she's kind of got a crush on him after that. So there's character stuff happening. In the last issue of this book, he gets in a fight with this other guy who has a thing for the princess. So there is character interactions happening here, but there is no plot stuff happening here. And ideally, I would want there to be a little bit of both. Looking at just off the top of my head, Grant Morrison's New X-Men. In one particular issue, I have no idea which one it was, Jumbo Carnation, who was a mutant fashion designer, had been murdered. And then Beast and Cyclops, they go and they're investigating the crime scene. And then Beast has come out
out to this magazine saying that he's gay. And then Cyclops is saying, like, look, I've known you since we were kids. I know that you're not gay. And Beast is saying, I'm not. I'm playing with the concept of mutant identity. I'm kind of trying to make a statement here. Basically, I don't remember how his exact words were. So you've got some good character interactions in that issue. And you've also got the plot stuff of Jumbo Carnation has died, and also Quentin Quire and his friends are getting hooked on drugs, and they're about to start a mutant revolution at the school. So you've got stuff that's actually happening, plot stuff, and you have good character stuff as well. This book has the character stuff. Some of it is good, some of it is a little hokey in my opinion, but it does not really have any of the plot stuff. And I am assuming, having not read Magician Apprentice the novel, and having not read Volume 2 of this comic book series, that a lot of the plot stuff is going to happen in Volume 2. Unfortunately, after reading this, and it took me like 3 or 4 days, I had to stop and take a break because I just was not interested in it. I wasn't enjoying it. Nothing was happening. After reading this book, I'm not interested in the rest of it. It may become fantastic in Volume 2. Raymond Feist may be an incredible writer. I have no idea. I did buy these books. This is Volume 3. This is Volume 2. I don't know if I necessarily want to seek out Volume 1. I don't know why I bought these books, because I've never read anything by Raymond Feist. But I have never read anything from him. He may be a great writer. Unfortunately, this is not a great adaptation. And that's really not the fault of the people who did this, because adapting any novel that's going to be 400 pages long into a comic book, into a series of comic books, that's going to be very difficult to do, unless this book was a series of really short stories, like this thing that Pug does, and then in the next chapter, Pug does something else, and then in the next chapter, something else happened, but that's not how this comic book is structured, so it's very difficult for me to enjoy this, or even recommend anything about this comic book, and I hate that, because I have really enjoyed stuff by Ryan Stegman, Glass Oming. I had to say it, I'm not a big fan of Brett Booth's artwork. It felt very stiff in this, so when we get to Ryan Stegman in the last half of the book, I felt like his art worked a lot better for me. But I really wanted to like this. I wanted this to be enjoyable. I enjoy fantasy. I enjoy comic books. In theory, this should have been the easiest sell in the world for me, and it wasn't. So that is about all that I have to say about Magician Apprentice, the comic book. I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, I will see you guys in the future with something else. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.